You were 7 years old, and you were already responsible for keeping someone alive. No school, no playground, no childhood as we know it. In the Stone Age, the moment you could walk, you had a job, and the moment you could run, your life depended on doing it right. This is what growing up looked like 10,000 years ago, and it will change the way you think about everything you call hard. The first thing you need to understand is that childhood as a concept did not exist, not the way we think of it. There was no protected period of life where you got to simply be a kid. From the moment a Stone Age child could stand, they were being shaped into a survivor. Not by school, not by books. By watching, doing, and staying alive. By age 3, children were already learning to read the world around them. Not words, tracks, weather, plants. A 3-year-old in the Stone Age could tell the difference between an animal that was resting and one that was ready to run. They learned this because an adult showed them once, maybe twice. After that, you were expected to know. By age 5, you had a role in the group. You watched the younger children, not occasionally, every single day. If a toddler wandered toward the river, it was your job to stop it. If a baby cried and the mother was working, you picked it up. You were 5 years old and you were already someone's protector. By age 7, boys were following the hunters. Not to watch from a distance, to carry, to track, to learn every step of how an animal moved, where it slept, how it panicked, and how to use that panic against it. They carried spare tools. They memorized the terrain. They were being built into hunters in real time, on real hunts, with real consequences if they made a mistake. Girls at the same age were learning something equally demanding. How to identify every edible plant in a territory that could span dozens of miles. Which roots were safe in spring but toxic in summer. Which berries looked identical but one could kill you. This was not a lesson learned from a book. It was learned by walking the land every single day with someone who already knew it and being tested on what you remembered. By age 10, you were not a child in any practical sense. You could track, you could gather, you could start a fire, you could navigate, you could make basic tools, you could care for the injured, and you could keep younger children alive on your own. A 10-year-old in the Stone Age carried more real responsibility than most adults in the modern world. And here is the part that stops people cold. They were not miserable. The archaeological record, the studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, the skeletal evidence, none of it points to traumatized children crushed under impossible weight. It points to children who were deeply embedded in the life of their group, who had purpose from the moment they were old enough to act on it, who knew exactly what they were for. There was no gap between learning and doing, no years of preparation before real life began. You learned something and immediately used it. The feedback was instant, the stakes were real, and the sense of contribution was not theoretical. When you came back from a gathering run with food that fed your family that night, you felt it. When you kept a toddler from falling into a fire, you felt it. You were not preparing for life, you were already inside it. The violence was real too. Children in the Stone Age saw death up close and regularly. Animals they had helped hunt. Members of their group who did not survive an injury or a winter. There was no shielding from it. Death was part of the texture of existence, and children understood that from an early age, not because anyone sat them down and explained it, but because life made it impossible to look away. Injuries happened constantly. A child who broke a bone had to keep moving as best they could, because the group could not stop for one person indefinitely. Illness was confronted without medicine as we know it. Pain was managed with what the land provided, and with the presence of people who stayed close. Resilience was not a value that Stone Age children were taught. It was something the world built into them, whether they wanted it or not. And yet they played. The evidence for that is everywhere too. Carved figures, miniature tools clearly made for small hands, footprints preserved in ancient mud that show children running in patterns that serve no survival purpose. They played because play in that context was also practice. Every game sharpened something real. Every chase built speed. Every game of pretend rehearsed a skill that would matter later. The line between play and work did not exist the way it does now. A boy throwing a stone at a target was playing. He was also becoming a hunter. A girl weaving small strips of plant material together was playing. She was also learning the foundations of making shelter and clothing. Nothing was separate. Everything fed into everything else. By the time a Stone Age child reached what we would call their early teens, they were fully functional members of a survival group. Not in training, not supervised, genuinely capable of contributing to the group's ability to live through any given day. Some were already leading younger children on gathering runs. Some were already making tools that the adults used. And then there is the question that sits underneath all of this. Was it better? Was it worse? The honest answer is that it was simply different in a way that is almost impossible to fully translate. Those children had something that is genuinely hard to find now: total clarity about what they were for. Not a vague future goal, not a role they were working toward, a function that mattered today, right now, to the people standing next to them. We have given children in the modern world something those Stone Age kids never had: safety, time, the luxury of a protected childhood. Those things are real gifts. But somewhere in giving them, we also removed the thing that made growing up feel like it meant something. The sense that you were needed. Not someday. Now. The Stone Age child had no childhood in the way we mean it, but they always knew exactly who they were. And most of them, by the time they were 10 years old, had already saved someone's life. That is not a small thing to grow up knowing about yourself.